Hello everybody and welcome back to another tutorial video. This is going to be a really fun, in-depth one that I think you guys are really going to appreciate if you guys have been watching my other building dashboards from scratch. The end goal of this series is to be able to know how to build the most advanced Python dashboards available underneath your tool arsenal so that you could really innovate and create. And we are going to take it to that next level with this next project. From a lot of my students, I've gotten many questions on how to style my dashboards, how to make them run and look really smooth and nice, and they were having a lot of trouble with the CSS and styling, and I completely understand. Whenever I first got into Dash, it was a little bit intimidating, especially with the styling component and getting everything to look and work nicely. So with that, I found a module that is a perfect addition to suit our needs. And this module is called Dash-Bootstrap-Components. And this is the Dash-Bootstrap-Components tutorial. And what we see here is what we will be building, where we are going to be taking a bunch of our individual graphs and we are going to be combining it into one large Dash application. This isn't a Django application, so I don't want to get those two mixed up. This is solely running off of Dash. So with that, this is one big graph, even though it doesn't look like it. This actually looks like a web page. What we have here is we have a Navbar. We have important links with a drop-down menu. I included the YouTube channel, the Potluck app, the project GitHub, and then Plotly/Dash documentation, Dash Bootstrap documentation, and then I also included up here the Dash Udemy course. If you guys don't know, most of you have already signed up for it, but I have released a Udemy course that is a perfect starting point for anybody looking to build advanced graphs with Python. And I have gotten such an amazing response from everybody, and I really want to thank you all for all the support. So with that, if you are interested, check down below. There is a discounted link. You don't have to get it. I do release most of my material on YouTube, but there is specific awesome material on the Udemy course that you won't find on my YouTube page. This is one of the videos that I'm going to be uploading onto the course along with another one. But for this video, let's talk about what this actually is able to do. So right here, we have an image of what we are actually building, some of the graphs. If we open up the app, it opens up a modal, and within this modal, we can actually use our graph right out the bat. And look how smooth that was. From going from nothing to actually just pulling up the application, it is such a smooth transition. It looks really nice. And this is the professional grade of building out an advanced on-the-fly updating dashboard that people are really looking for, and there really isn't anything else that on the market that is able to provide this type of skill set, in my opinion. So with that, we are including some of the dashboards that we built along the Udemy course. I won't be covering how to build them out individually because they are on the Udemy course, but if you didn't get the Udemy course, you shouldn't have a problem including your own dashboards or following along to see how I got this all to work. So before we dive into the code and we do the codeathon, the approach that I want to take is I want to give you a little bit of an idea of the Dash Bootstrap components. So let's dive into the documentation real quick and we can get an idea of what we're actually working with here. So if I go to the Dash Bootstrap components documentation, it's easy to install with this pip install Dash Bootstrap components. So if you put that into pip, you can easily get it into your project. The only other thing that is important is declaring it, and then you have the freedom of being able to build out these cool graphs, and we're going to dive into that in a second. But if you want to know the different components that are offered, if you have any type of experience with web design, I'm sure that you have used just regular Bootstrap before to style your HTML, and it really does speed up the development process. This takes all of that and it brings it into Dash, and basically on the back end it figures out the React, because Dash is actually actually pulling on Python, and on the back end for the front end, it's using React. So it's actually a really good combination. So that's why you get that fast, smooth transition times whenever you're pulling up the graphs, and why it looks so elegant once you're actually able to get this thing to work. So with this, the documentation is spot on. I gotta commend the developers of this for the amazing documentation, because it really makes the development process so easy after you do install it. So if you want to bring in any of these other components, it's easy to do. For example, a card. We want to bring in a card. You just go down here, you just copy the code, and then you alter it to meet the needs of your current project, and you bring it in. If you do this a little bit, you'll kind of get the hang of what you're actually working with within this development process. There is a drawback from what I have been able to notice with Dash and Dash-Bootstrap-Components is it's really spaghetti code. And I guess the way that I want to explain this before we dive into the code is, let's break it down like this. So if you are familiar with React, then you know about components. All of these different components make up the overall application. So you can have a component that's a button, you'll have a component that is a card, you'll have a component that is a drop-down menu, so on, so on, and so on. It's also the same thing with Flutter and apps that are widgets that make up the whole application. So you have a bunch of widgets that separate individual sections of the code, and you basically drop that into the overall application framework. So it's the same thing with Dash-Bootstrap-Components. That's the way that you need to kind of approach this, is you're creating small bits of code that basically just represent a card, that just represent a button, a badge, that type of thing. And you're trying to arrange it into a larger application. So if you think about it on the individual section, it's going to make this development process a lot easier to understand. So with that, let's jump into the code, and let's see if we can kind of understand an overall overview of it before we do the code-a-thon, and we will code this project together. So pulling up PyCharm, like I said, this is a Dash application. There is no Django. There is nothing else really on here, just Python. And that's one of the amazing things about Dash, is all you really need to know is Python, and then you write that and you could really build awesome graphs, which wasn't able to, to be achieved. It used to be where you needed JavaScript and a bunch of other ones to kind of get this to work. But with Dash, you just import Dash and you write the whole thing in Python, and it just works. So with that, let's talk about the imports that we're going to be needing. If you follow my other tutorial videos, you're already going to have most of these imports on lock. So for example, import Dash, that's an easy one. The new import is right here, which is import Dash-Bootstrap-Components as DBC. Easy to do. Then we have import Dash-HTML components. We have used that before. And then we need input, output, and state. A lot of the components within Bootstrap do use input, output, state, like the modal, that basically you click the button and then the graph appears. So that's a modal, and that uses input, output, state. That's one of the harder things to kind of get your head wrapped around with Dash, but I feel like we did a really good job during the Udemy course to kind of addressing and figuring out the basics of input, output, state, and to kind of see how it works. Basically, the input is what is being sent over to the app callback. The output is what is being returned from the app callback, and then the state is the current state of whatever element that takes in both of those. Anyway, so other than that, we have requests, base64, that's for image processing. Same thing with bytes.io, that's also for image processing. And then we have Dash core components. We just need that plotly graph objects. That's just a regular plotly graph. The cool thing is, because this is developed by Plotly, Plotly and Dash are two different things, but because Dash is the more advanced version of Plotly, you can easily, with with no stress at all, bring in regular plotly graphs into a Dash application and just make it work. Then you have collections, and this is just for counter. This is for that one application that is, counts the letters that go into a overall paragraph, and it spits out how many times what keywords are being used the most and counts all the letters or numbers and all that. So anyway, let's talk about what we are doing here. So the first thing that is different is this is what we have to change. We are changing the dash.dash external style sheet. We need to make sure that that is equal to DBC themes bootstrap, and that just brings in our bootstrap theme from Dash-Bootstrap-Components, and it kind of sets that up for us. So that's really easy to do. Now, the next thing I did is I kind of sectioned this code into two different areas. I created the navbar, which is right here, and this takes up the whole navbar. We'll jump back into it. And then this, where this line is, this represents the body. So you could think of these as like the two main sections of the application. I would also have one underneath this that would be the footer. But basically what we're doing is we're taking those two sections, the navbar and the footer, or in the body, and we're including that within the app layout. And that's going to represent all of our front end. So let's dive into the two individual sections first. So for the navbar, I'm creating a nav item, and this is going to be the link of the Dash Udemy course. I'm creating the drop down. This is the drop down menu, and I just copied this straight from the documentation, and I just fixed it to meet my needs. But this is just a drop down button. And then down here, I lay everything out. I create the actual navbar. So this is the actual layout of everything. These are the individual, what you could consider widgets or components of the application. So you have a nav item, and you have the drop down, which go into the full nav bar, which is right here. So now you can kind of see how this makes a little bit more sense. And within here, we have a row, and this has an image that we are taking, and that's just, our logo. Then we have a column that we are creating. And then after that, we are creating the nav toggle, which is all part of this huge nav bar object. So that's what we're doing with that. You still have the ability to declare like what color you want. I want it to be dark, and then class name and all that other good stuff. And you could change where it routes you to and all that. So after that, now we're jumping into the body. The way that I approached the body is I figured out I wanted to import the individual components of the graphs first. So I took all the HTML and I copied it over, and we did a the drop down of the app component. So this is the drop down app that basically takes 3 images and the 3 cities, and you're able to go cipher through them and pull on, I want a picture of New York, I want a picture of Houston, I want a picture of San Francisco, and it automatically updates it. Then we have the text app. This is basically the common words where you drop in, a paragraph, and it says how many times that word is used. This is the HTML side for that, where we are creating an HTML div. We have an HTML H1 to basically give us a title. Then we have the graph. We're giving it the ID. This is where we want the graph to render, and this is what we want the background and styling to be. And then we have the text area underneath it, which is the text component, and then we have a div at the very bottom. And same thing for the slider app, basically all the same components, and then we are working on the individual cards. So this is a component, and this component goes into the next component, which is our card component. And this is basically just to give us a rundown. The card component is this right here. So what we need to do is we need to bring in a card, an image, all this, and then an app that basically opens up the module that has the actual application within here, or the dashboard. So what I have here is I'm creating the card. So card 1 is this card variable. Within this card variable, I have the image right here. I have the card body, which takes up all of this. The title, what I want underneath the title. The button, this is the modal button, and this opens, the ID of open, and then I gave it a color and all that. And then this is the actual modal that opens up that we see. So within this modal, we have the header of modal. We can change it to, you know, the actual application name or anything. This could be anything. This is just the title. The body is where I am including the actual application. So drop down app is right here, which goes up to our drop down app up here. So this variable that I created with all that information that we just went over, I take that and I'm just dropping it within the body. And then I have a footer of just closing out the model so that we can, you know, go back to our overall portfolio that we are creating. So I did the same thing for all of the cards, so I'm not going to run through them, but they are just the same formula, so you kind of understand. So card 2 and then card 3. And then this is just an extra card that I created, and we can see that that's going to be this gray card up here. Like I said, they don't have to be in any order, because like you would think that I would do that card first and then these. It doesn't matter, because we are just creating individual components that we are bringing into the overall application, and that comes into this next section. So this is where you know, the overall application happens, is where we have this row, which is going to make up the whole body of the application. We have the first row, which is going to be the image. That's going to be this image up here. And then we are bringing in this next row, which has a card component. And that's just bringing in this card component up here. And that is this right here. And then underneath that, we are creating a row with columns, and we have 3 columns that match card 1, card 2, and card 3, where we're taking in these 3 components that we just created, and then we're bringing them into these columns, and that sets up our layout for the overall application. And then we just combine everything into one large layout, so that we bring in the header first, and then we bring in the main row that has all of our content. So underneath this, this is where you get the interactivity of the individual components, and this is like the app functions where you have app callbacks. So this is for the drop down to get all of the, you know, checking and all that, the output, input, and, you know, state. This is where we set all that up when we created the application, and I put that at the end. We also have the slider that comes next, and then we have the text app, and then we have the modals, and these are basically, you know, for being able to pull up that card once we click that button, and that just says, is it open, is it clicked to close, then close it, and then the state is open. So it's not that hard as far as the code, but this is just, you know, very simple. Just toggle the modal, toggle it off or on, and then we have the Navbar, and then that's it. It's not that bad, you know. So if you look at it from the perspective of, I am basically building out individual components that make up a large component, and I'm bringing in that large component into the overall layout, it's easy to understand. I would recommend, while you are building out this or anything with Dash-Bootstrap, because we aren't creating individual files for the individual components and we're bringing it in. I have tried that, but I've had some issues. So I'm going to continue to try to figure out if there's a cleaner way to go about it. But the point is just make sure that you're providing good documentation as you are building out this. So I just, you know, said that this is the Navbar. It's kind of clear to understand. I'm making a lot of comments as I am developing this out to kind of give me an idea of where everything is, because it is easy for you to just keep on dropping all this in and for you to get really confused. And that's really what I want to avoid during this development process. So just make sure that you're doing good documentation and you will be fine. And just keep on running it along the way. You're not trying to build this all out and not run it. You're trying to build it out a little bit, get the Navbar working, run it, all right? Then you're trying to get a card working. Okay, you got it, run it. And you just keep on running it, making sure that it is working along the way, and you'll have a final awesome result that you're going to be proud of. So with that, let's just jump into the actual coding of this project, and you can kind of see how my brain is working as we build it out together. Alright everybody, now we get to jump into the fun part of coding all this out. Before we do, just to kind of show you, and I guess this was kind of self-explanatory, but the cool thing about building it out this way is if you look at the application, if we minimize it, it just basically renders perfectly. It cleans it up, it does just what we want, You know, so for a small tablet or a phone, it will work this way versus, you know, on a desktop, it will work this way. So just to kind of show you that, I know you guys probably already assumed that, but that's the power of Bootstrap. So with that, let's start coding out this project. So I guess looking at it, what we're really going to need is we're going to be needing this Navbar, and we got to do some imports first. So let's get our imports out of the way, and then we'll actually start coding all this out. So I want to jump over here, and we are going to get started. All right, so I'm going to import Dash, so import Dash. Then I want to bring in Dash-Bootstrap-Components. So in order to do that, we'll just knock that out of the way. We can just do pip install Dash Bootstrap. And I already installed it, so I am good to go. Everything else should already be installed if you've been following along. So I'm not going to go over that. So this next import, we'll do import dash bootstrap components, and we're going to name that as DBC. Then we want to bring in HTML, so we'll bring in import dash HTML components, and we're just going to label that as HTML. Then we want to bring in input, output, and state, and that is in our import dash dot dependencies. And we want to actually make that a from, and then we want to import input, output, and state. Perfect. So then we need to bring in request and base64. So that's going to be for our image processing of one of our apps. So import request. If you don't use this, or if you're going to be bringing in your own application, you don't need to include this. Like I said, this is just for one of our applications that works with images. So from IO, import bytes IO. So those two are, you know, optional. Then we got core components. So import dash underscore core components, and we're going to name that as DCC. Then we need to bring in Plotly, so we will do import plotly.graph objects, and we want to name that as Go. And then the last one is also optional, which is collections. So from collections, import counter, and that just counts how many times a word is in a sentence or a paragraph or a string. So with that, let's get started. The first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to initiate it, and that's going to be app equals dash dot dash, and this is where we provide our external style sheet. So external style sheet is going to equal a list, and within this list we want to bring in dbc dot themes dot bootstrap, and that takes care of that. So then what I want to do is I want to bring in our layout. So we are going to comment this as layout. Actually, I'm going to call this final layout render, so we can kind of get an idea, give it better declarification. And this is just going to be equal to app.layout, and this is going to be equal to an html.div, and within this div, this is where we're going to be putting in all of our good stuff. Well, we're going to create a list, and in this list we will have our navbar and our actual body. So with that, we can continue to move down, and we can basically declare the actual application. So we will do if underscore underscore name underscore underscore is equal to underscore underscore main underscore underscore. Then you want to do app.run server debug equals true, and then we can do port equals 8888. So we just built a Dash application. Believe it or not, we can actually run this and we can see what we get. Let's pull it up. Check out that Dash application. Is that not the best Dash application we have built so far? Oh, it is completely blank, but it is working. So that's a good sign. Now, what I want to do is I want to jump into being able to bring in these Bootstrap components into this actual application. So I'm going to jump over to our Bootstrap components. I'm going to work my way down to the Navbar, and over here I'm going to scroll down to this bottom one. I'm going to copy all this, as you can see that I've already kind of started, and I'm going to go over here. We're going to bring this in. So right above the app layout, I'm going to give me some space. I'm going to comment this, and I'm going to call this Navbar, and then underneath it I will do another comment, and I'm going to call this Navbar end, so I know what I'm working with here. And I'm going to paste the code within here. There are a few edits that we're going to have to make. One of the most important to actually get this thing to work is this callback. We have to make sure that our callbacks are happening after our layout. So this is where our callbacks have to be. It doesn't really matter anything else, but for the callbacks, they have to be after the initial layout of the application. So for this, I'm going to declare this as app callback. And then underneath that, I'm going to do another comment where I will do end callback or end app callback, just for good naming convention. And that's where I'm actually going to paste the callback for the Navbar. And underneath here, I'm just going to call this what it is, just label it Navbar, so I know what I'm working with here. So with that, we have this all rendered. The only thing that we have left to do is we need to bring in this Navbar into our actual layout, because right now our layout is rendering nothing. So we need to bring in that Navbar, and if we go back to our page, we should be able to reload it and see what we get. And as you can see, it's working. So there are a few changes that we're going to want to make. We don't need the search functionality. We want to change the image, and then we could change Navbar to something else. So that's what we will work on next. So I'm going to zoom this up so we can actually see what's going on here. I'll zoom in a little bit. And what I want to do next is let's just change the image. The image should be really easy to change. You could provide any link that you want. For me, because I have this hosted on one of my servers, I'm just going to paste this link because I think it looks good to suit my needs. So then this is going to be the row where we have our column of the search and then the button. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to basically change this up a bit. So I want to go above it, and I want to add a nav item, and this is just going to be like a nav link that's going to be going to my actual course. You can make this go to anything that you want, or you can ignore it. So I will do dbc.nav item, and within here I'm going to be able to provide the nav link. So I will do dbc.nav link, and after that I'm going to provide the name of the nav link, which is going to be Dash Udemy course is what I want it to be, and then I want to give it a location. So I want that to go to this URL, which will send students directly to my course. So with that done, now I want to create the drop down. So what I'm going to do is delete this search because I'm not going to need it, and I'm just going to call this drop down, and within here I'm going to make this equal to dbc.dropdown menu, and within this drop down menu I want to be able to provide a children variable, and that's going to be equal to a list, and this is where I am going to store the drop down items. So I will do dbc.dropdown item, and within here I will be able to provide what I want this first one to be. So I'm going to call this one YouTube channel, and it's going to have a location of YouTube, and it's going to point to my actual channel. So once I paste it in, it looks like that. And all we need to do is to provide some other ones, but because I am a lazy programmer, I'm just going to do a copy and paste for this one because it's kind of repetitive. So this is what I have, and I will kind of talk about it real quick. So once I paste that, the only difference is that we do have this divider to kind of split up the drop down menus, which I thought looks nice. You could include it or not, just depending on how many drop down items that you have. The only other thing that I would like to add is just close this off so that we clean that up a little bit. But before we do, I do want to add some other information. For example, I do want to declare that this is going to be a nav and this is going to be equal to true. Then I want to say, is it in the nav bar? And I also want to say that to true. And then I want to give it a label, and this is what people will see, and whenever they click on this label, it will show up with the different options. So for my label, I will just include important links as the label, and if they click on that, they will see the YouTube channel, the app, the GitHub, and then the documentation underneath that. So with that, I think that looks good. Now all I have to do is bring that into the actual nav bar. So right now we have a HTML but what we want to do is we want to create a container. So I'm going to do dbc.container to kind of contain the different links and then the drop down menu that I just created. And I'm going to put all this within this container. So now that I added this container, within this container, the A tag looks good. The row, I just want to change the name from being a Plotly logo. I'm going to just make that a logo. So that, you know, it's just more representative of what I'm trying to do here. And then I want to change the title from being a nav bar to portfolio would be a good one. And then I want to work within this collapsed variable, and this is where we're going to basically include the drop down and the other nav. So the way that I'm going to approach this is make this collapse actually equal a nav. So I will do a dbc.nav, and within this nav I will include a list that is going to contain the nav item. And then I also want the drop down. And after this list is done, I want to add a class name. And this class name is just for styling. I'm going to do ML and then auto. So just kind of auto resize it. And then I also want to articulate that I want this nav bar to be equal to true so that we know what we're dealing with here. And then after that, everything else looks good. So I want to just continue to scroll down. The only thing I see that I can add is after this dark variable, I want to give this a class name, and within this class name, I want to do MB-5. And I think that will be good for styling purposes. So with all of this said and done, I do see an issue where I messed up when doing this container. So I want to delete that last part, and I just want to move that up one notch. And I'll add a comma, and that will work just fine. And that should clear that up. So that is our nav bar. So let's actually see what we're working with here. I'm going to rerun this code, and I'm going to see what we have. So let's minimize this, and if I go over to it, it looks like it is working, and it looks really nice. So the nav bar is done. We have all of our links here. We have our dashboard Udemy course, menu item right up here. We have portfolio and a little image. So now we can actually start working on the app content. So now that we finished this off, I'm going to give us just a lot of space here, and I'm going to kind of articulate that this is important, and this is going to be the app body. So for this, I'm going to first have to bring in the app components, and this app components is going to be referencing the actual applications that we have built. So let me make this big again, and I'm going to go into our project, and the first one that I want to bring in is going to be our drop down. So in order to get this to work, all we need is the HTML first. So I'm going to grab where that function is all the way down to layout, and I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to go back into our project, and I'm going to paste that. But before I do want to label this. So this is going to be our drop down app, and then underneath here we can paste it. The only change that I want to make make is we don't need multiple app layouts. So as we can see, this is an app layout, that is an app layout. So we want to make this take on the more of a component role. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm just going to give it a variable name. So I'm just going to call this drop down app, so that we know what we're working with here, and that should finish that. So we can also go back into our drop down, and we want to copy our app callback, because that's the other thing that we're going to need. So if we go back over here, we have our callbacks, we have our navbar, and then we want to come down and we want to include our app. So this is going to be our drop down app, which is going to be our callback, so we know what we're working with here. So that is done. So just to show that it is working, if we go back into our app layout, we put a comma, we can do drop down, and if we check it, we can reload it. And it looks like I have an error. Basically what's going on is I didn't name this right, so we need to pull on this drop down app. I don't know why I'm pulling on drop down, so I'm just going to put that here instead. Then if we reload it, and I'll rerun this real quick, so rerun, reload the page, and give it a second. And it works. So now we have the app, and the app is working, as you can see here. So what we want to do next is we want to bring in the cards, and we kind of want to position everything. So I'm going to go back into our actual application, or I guess before I do, we can go into our components. We can make our way down to the card, because that's what we're going to need to bring in next. And then we're going to copy this whole card variable right here, because this is the one that we're going to be using. Now we can go back into our actual application, zoom back in, and because this is going to be the body, let me just clarify this a little bit better. So body, and then I'm going to scroll down to underneath the app component, and I'm going to label this one the cards. So cards, and within here I'm going to do another one and label this one card 1, and this is where I'm going to paste this new card variable. So within this card variable, we need to basically include an image. I've already kind of done that with this one. Just to show you what I did, I'll delete this and we can go through the process again. So if I go into the main project folder, which is going to be Dash-Bootstrap, this folder, I'm going to create a new dictionary, and I'm just going to call this one static. And then within here, I'm going to create a new dictionary, and I'm just going to call this images, because that's just proper protocol. So images, you could just paste it wherever, but I just like to make things look nice. Then I'm going to pull up my Finder. I'm going to find where my actual file is that has a picture of the application that I built, and I'm just going to paste that, or just drop it into this images folder. So this is just going to be drop down, and it's really easy to bring in this way. So if I go back into the code, I can go up to where this image is, and what I want to do is just go into static, and then I want to go into images, and then after that I want to bring in drop down .png, and that will take care of all that. You can also paste, I guess, drop your image into, you know, like a Google Docs or an Imgur or whatever, and just include the link afterwards. But if you want to include the image directly into your project, you can do it this way. So with that, we need to declare what this actual card is representing. So I will just call this title something. I'm going to call it drop down components, and images. I think that's a good representation of what this application is. And if I could spell correctly, that'd be great. But with that, then we can add a quick description of what this is actually entailing. So I'm just going to delete this, and I can, you know, say whatever I want of what do we learn while building this app. What does this app actually do? So I'm just going to say we learned how to create drop-down components and render different types of images within a Dash application. So I think that's a a good representation of what we learned with that. And then we want the button, and we're going to change it up a little bit, and then we'll say launch graph is what we'll call this button, and it's got a primary color. So what we want to do is if I zoom out again, we can go back into our components. We're trying to do a modal, so it pops up, and as you can see, the modal does this. So we want to make our button on the card image turn into a modal. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this DBC modal part. We're going to copy all of this code, and then we want to go to where this button is, and we're going to paste that underneath it. So now that we have this modal in, we can, kind of clean up our code a little bit, and that's what I'm going to do, make it look a little bit nicer. Then we need to add a few things. So if we look, the modal has a button also, and it just has an ID of open. So I'm going to copy that ID, and I'm going to paste that in. And then I also want to give it some styling. So for this style, I'm going to make this equal to a dictionary, because that's how you work with styling within a Dash application. Let me actually zoom this in a bit, and we're going to do a margin, and within this margin I want it to be auto, so it auto scales, and then I want to do a width of 100%, just because I think it looks a little nicer. So I will do that 100%. And then that should finish that. So we could just change this header. I'm just going to call it a modal, so we know what this is launching. And then we want to include the actual application. So we can take this application that we included. We're going to copy that, and we're going to delete it. And then we're going to put that within the body of this modal. So with all of this said and done, we have this card image. Now we need to bring in the card. So I'm going to bring in the card right here, and that's just referencing all the work that we did on this card. So with this said and done, if I zoom out, just making sure that everything is still working, I'm going to reload this. And right now we have our card, we have all the information that we need, we have a button, and if we click the button, it's not doing anything, and it's because we don't have our app callback set up. So I'm going to go back into here, and we can copy this app callback right here that is associated to this modal. I'm going to zoom back in. We can go back down to this area, and I could go right here. I'm going to label this modal 1, and within here I'm going to paste that. So if I go back into our actual application and I reload it and I launch it, right here it is actually working. The only issue I see is we didn't configure our application to match the dimensions of this new, I guess, portfolio project that we have set up. So what I'm going to do is we can kind of see that the image is overextending over, our modal. So let's just fix that and make it look clean. So I'm going to open this back up. I'm going to go down to where our drop-down app is. I'm going to change the width to be 100%, and that should fix that issue. So 100%, 100%, 100%. So if we go back and if we reload this modal, I think everything should be done on our first modal. And lo and behold, it is looking clean and finished. So that is awesome. So all we need to do is we need to create basically 2 more of these for the 2 other applications that we're going to be doing, which shouldn't be that hard to do. So I'm going to close this off. I'm going to go back into our actual code. I'm going to go up to where our actual app components are. I'm going to create another 2 and we'll bring them in. The first one is going to be our square root slider. So I'll do square root slider app, and then the next one is going to be our word count app. So word count app. So now that we have these 2 apps declared, I guess commented or whatever, now I'm going to go to them. So the first one is going to be our slider. So within our range slider, I'm going to copy all of this. I'm going to bring that into our application, and I'm going to paste that right there. So that looks good. Then I can go over to our text area that we did. I'm going to copy all of that from up here, coming down till the callback, and I'm going to paste that in this area. Then we can work down till we find our callbacks, and we can go down to our drop-down app, and after this drop-down app, I'm going to give us a space, and then I will do our square root app, and then I want to do our word count app. So these are both commented. Now I can go back into each one of these codes. So range slider, my bad. And then we'll take this all the way up to here, copy it, go back into the code. There we go. Then we can go into the text area. We're going to take this whole callback all the way up to the return, and then we are going to paste that also after the word callback. So these are looking good. The only thing that I noticed is scrolling up where we have these layouts. These functions are the same, so we really only need one. So I'm just going to delete one, and that should fix that issue because they are the exact same from what it looked like. And then we can bring in some cards. So what I'm going to do is scroll until I find my card variable, which is right here. So this is card 1. I'm going to copy all of this moving down, and then I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to paste it again. And I'm just going to change these to be card 3, card 3, card 2, card 2, and that will fix that. So I also need the images, so I'm going to go in here. I'm going to rename these real quick, so bring both of these into there. And with that, once they both come in, add, we should be good to go. I can actually connect these. So the first card is going to be our square root. So square root app .png, and then the next one is going to be our word count. So word count.png. So now that these are done, I'm just going to change the titles, word count app, and then we can name this one, which is going to be our square root app. And we can reference, because up above, these are still referencing the app layouts. So I'm going to rename this. This one is actually going to be our square root app. And this next one is going to be our word app. So now I can go back down, and we have card 1 taken care of. Card 2, we want to make sure that card 2 is going to be equal to our square root app, and then our card 3 is going to be equal to our word app. And now that these are set up, I want to scroll up and I want to create the body. And within here, I'm going to give this the body and equal that to an HTML.div. And within here, we're going to add dbc.row. And within this row, I'm going to create a list that's going to have our cards. And within each card, I will do a column to kind of arrange it. So dbc.column. And then I want to bring in html.div, and within this div, I will include our cards. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it two more times. I'm going to indent this to make it look nice, and then within here, we're going to include card 1, card 2, and then card 3. So let's do that. So we'll do card 2, and then card 3. So with this, we can delete this card. We're going to include our body, and let's see what isn't working, because that was a lot of code. So I'm going to refresh this, rerun this, And we didn't do the modals because all the modals are the same for all the cards. So we can't have that. So what is breaking at this point is we need to go down because we only have the modal for the first one. So I'm going to copy all of this, and then I'm going to come down and I'm going to do modal 2. And then we're going to do modal 3. So modal 3. And I'm going to paste that 2 more times. And then all we really want to do is add a 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3. And that just gives us, so that they're connected to the right ones. And then we can scroll up, and then we want to make sure that this ID is going to be close to close 3. The ID for this one is going to be open 3. And then we need to make sure that this modal is equal to ID of 3. And then the same thing for 2. So 2, ID of 2, and ID of 2. So with that, let's go back. We're going to relaunch this again. So far, so good. Zoom out and let's refresh. And here we go. So I know that was a lot, and but let's see what happens. So this one's working. This one is working. I grabbed the wrong one, but it's working. We got an app in here, so that's all that matters. And then this one is also working. So that's awesome. So we got all of our apps in. The hard work is done. Now it's off the easy street. How do we want to just make it look a little bit nicer? Let's just add an image, and then let's add a card kind of talking about it. And that should finish us off. So let's go back in here. I'm going to go back into my images, and I'm going to just take this image and I'm going to put this into the image section. So I added that. You can add any image that you want, or you don't have to do the second part. We're basically done. But like I said, I'm just going to continue on. So now that I added that image, I'm going to scroll down. We're going to go to where our body is, and we just can add to it. So let's add a row. So we'll do dbc.row, and within here we'll do html.image, and within this image we will add a src, which is going to be equal to static slash images and then slash Python coder half underscore edits.png. I could have probably named that one better, but whatever. Then I want to give it some styling, so I will do style is going to equal a dictionary. I want to make sure that it's going to be a float. I want it to float right. Then I want to make sure that I have clear, and I want that clear to be right. And then I want margin dash left. I want that equal to 19%. Then I want to make sure that I'm working within the width, and within the width I want that to be equal to 80 VW. And after that we can add the height. So for the height I want that to be equal to 30 VH. And then I'm going to close off the dictionary, close off all of that I did, and then add a comma. And that should finish that off. So then we can actually add a card. So I will do underneath this dbc.row, and then I want to add dbc.column. And then within this column, I want to take up an html.div. And then within this div, I want to do another column. So dbc.column. And then within this column, I want to do a card. So dbc.card. And within here, I will add the card content. So before I do that, I'm just going to close all of this off. So there we go. We close that off, and we can add whatever card content we want. So I'm going to just do that right up above, which is going to be up here. I'll just label this top card. So top card, and within here I could do card underscore content. And I want this content to be equal to a list, and in order to do this, I'm going to just take it straight from our application up here. So we can go into cards again, scroll down to one that looks like it would suit my needs. And I like this dark one right here. I think this is what I would go for. And I'm going to take everything within this list and I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it right there. And with this all said and done, let me indent this one. And I'm going to zoom back in. I can scroll down and I can add this card content right here. So card content, and the only thing I would like to do is just make sure that it's dark. So I'll just do color equals dark, and I could do inverse to make sure that the text is going to be white. So I'm going to do inverse equals true. So with this, let's actually see what we have here now that we finished this up. So I'm going to go back in here, go back to our actual application, reload it. So looking it over, I started to get this error, and it was a rookie mistake. Whenever we're including multiple components within a overall structure like this one, so we have this body, and then we have this is a component, this is a component, and then this row is a component. We need to add a list. That's just the Dash way. So once we add that list, and if we rerun our code, we can see what we're getting here. So I'm going to zoom back out. And once I do that, we can see what we have here. So pretty much everything is done. Everything's pretty much rendered. We can get rid of that. And the only thing that I could say that we could actually add is just a little bit of touching up. We can center these columns, make them look a little bit nicer. But other than that, everything else is pretty much done. So I'm going to open this back up, and I'm just going to do that last little bit. And that's relatively easy. All we need to do is go to the end of this row. We need to go one within it, and then we are going to add style, and within this style I will create a dictionary, and I want to include margin, and I want to make sure that the margin is going to be equal to auto. And after that we can add the width, so I will do width, and I want that to be 80, so 80 VW, and then we can end our dictionary. And that's going to take care of all that for us. The only other thing that I can think of is right up here, we can add a dbc dot row, and within this row I want to include a HTML dot p, and within this p I want to include a blank, and then I'm going to add a comma, and with that will add a little bit of space, and it just makes it look a little bit nicer. So with that, let's see what we have here. Let's refresh this thing, and that looks ideal. So this is how you can go about building this out. I hope that this kind of understands it. I know we kind of went through it pretty fast, but I didn't want to make this too long of a video. All of these are launching, which is perfect. Everything looks smooth and clean, and this is how you could really set up a foundation to build out advanced dashboards and applications with Dash. And this is really powerful when you marry it with Django, and I highly suggest watching my other tutorial video. I think the last one, that one's gotten an amazing response and people have really loved it, but it's how do you integrate Dash and Django together, and that video kind of showcases that. But with this added feature of Bootstrap and everything else, it really is a powerhouse stack that most programmers don't know about, and they're not yet playing within. So you are at the cusp edge of something really beautiful. So with that, if you're looking to learn more about Dash Udemy courses, I'd highly suggest checking out my Udemy course. Once again, there are a lot of resources in that, and I'm going to continue to add to it as I am with this video. And I have another really cool video that I think you guys are really going to like, and I'll give a synopsis, and I'll do a small video, but I won't do the full tutorial video. I'll only release that in the Udemy course. So I'd suggest checking that out. You can get it for like $13 if you use the link in the description or the one used within this app. But anyway, with that, if you guys are really liking what I'm doing here, give me a thumbs up, like my content on YouTube. It means a lot, keeps the motivation flowing through the blood. And anyway, with that, I will let you guys be. Have a wonderful day programming, and I will see you next time.